Viewers and Sport Calgary members, it's Dave and Dave coming to you live from the camera store. Tonight's talk is sports photography tips and tricks, sponsored by Sony Canada with Calgary-based Olympic and Paralympic sport photographer Dave Holland. Today's presentation is live, which could not happen without the hard work of our guys behind the scenes. Tonight we have Drew and Gary. We also have Riley behind the scenes who's looking after all the social medias. All the kids these days, It's all social media stuff. So thanks to them for all their hard work. The best part of these live events is that we can interact with you guys. So we're going to have a lot of questions we're going to pose to you, Dave. I hope you're ready for it.
Absolutely.
So we are monitoring the chat room, but if you're not comfortable in the chat room, you're more than welcome to email me. It's just dave@thecamerastore.com, and I will look after the questions there. Now, before I introduce our guest this evening, I want to thank our sponsor tonight, which is Sony Canada, and let you know if you have some Sony questions. We do have Anthony who's joining us in the chat room tonight. He has also arranged for anyone who has attended this event to get 10% off your Sony order within 30 days back on a prepaid Visa. Now, there are some exclusions, but if you're thinking of making the decision and buying some new Sony gear, make sure you email Evelyn at thecamerastore.com. That's EVELYN, and she will send you the details. Now for a proper introduction. Dave Holland is a 4-time Olympic and 6-time Paralympic photographer. He works out of the Canadian Sport Institute here in Calgary and has been involved in capturing great images of high-profile athletes for years. We've had him on as a guest in previous episodes, and he's a good friend to the store. So welcome, Dave.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
So before we get into some of your photos and your tips for great sports photographers, can you tell us a little bit about what you've been up to for like the last year?
The last year? Tokyo Olympics, Paralympics, 7 weeks there, and then home for a few months, and then back into the deep end with Beijing, the Olympics and Paralympics there.
Perfect. So what do we expect tonight from you? We're going to talk about some stuff.
Well, I really want this just to be an open dialogue, because whenever I sit in on these kind of things, the most I get out of them is when it's open dialogue.
Yeah.
So if people have questions, just fire away.
Perfect.
I have a few slides, but really I've had people in the past even just approach me for this saying, can you talk about workflow? So Chad, it's in there. So
100%. I can't wait to get into it. So let's get into sort of your first set of slides here.
Okay. Broken this up into a few different sections. I think what I'll do is just show these slides, and at the end of it, if anybody has any questions, just fire away. So a little bit about me. The Canadian Sport Institute, for lack of a better term, is the muscle behind the muscle. We provide everything that the athletes need on a daily basis, from training, strength, gym, physio, medical, nutrition, everything. Yeah. So we provide everything under one house for all the athletes to be able to, get to where they're going, which of course is the top of the hill. So that's my day-to-day, is just hanging out in the gym with the athletes and just catching the behind-the-scenes stuff.
Oh, fantastic.
When I'm not there, I also do some work for Winsport, because I'm at Winsport, so that's great. It's a great arrangement for both of us. And then I get hired every once in a while. So I just finished 5 days of diving for Diving Canada. I've got some volleyball coming up, and then off to Birmingham for the Commonwealth Games.
Wow,
so
exciting stuff.
Yeah.
So no, diving is a very tricky sport to shoot, but we'll talk about that a little bit later.
We've already gone over this. It's just, this is what I do. I work with Olympic and Paralympic athletes, so World Cups, training camps, you name it. I started out in high school on the yearbook club.
Oh, really?
Shooting film back in the day.
You're like a big geek back then.
Yeah. But then when I was done, it was like, I can't afford cameras, I can't afford darkroom, chemicals, paper, all that stuff, so I gave it up. Then I went on a trip in 2007, late 2007. I traveled on my own for 5 months. Oh. Took a camera with me, and didn't have a computer or anything, so everything was relearning all that, getting the composition right in the camera. And then I came back and just started shooting sports, and that led to this.
So what was it about sports that really drove you, right, compared to landscape or something like that?
Oh, I'm not a hippie. So, sports is scheduled, so I don't have to sit in the woods for 3 days to watch an owl turn his head or anything like that. So that's good. But I don't know, it's just I've always been drawn to sports. And it's the elite amateur athletes, the ones who pay to do what they do. So I don't shoot any of the Stampeders or the Flames or anything like that. I don't need to, I don't want to.
Interesting.
I would just rather hang out with all the all the people trying to get to the Olympics.
You
and
find
Paralympics.
when it comes to like professional athletes, it's more about a business, right? Where amateur athletes, it's more about the sport.
And you even see that within the amateur sports. Like I do a lot of work with the women's hockey team.
Yeah.
And the U18s and that kind of stuff. And it's night and day between the girls and the boys. The boys are all business.
Oh, really?
Right? U17s, U18s, all business. Yeah. The girls have fun. So it's just that different level of eyes and commitment and that kind of thing. So
Excellent.
they're no less committed, but it's just, where they're going is a little bit different than where the guys are going.
Cool.
So yeah.
That's all good. How do you sort of, you sort of slide there, right? Being there, trustworthy, building relationships, is that sort of like the main thing? Like, how do you get in? I get that question a lot as well.
That's everything. Well, for me with the athletes, because I have a different relationship, I always get a media pass for events, but I'm not traditional media. So I work with them, not for a newspaper or anything like that. So, it's in the gym's where I build the relationships because I see them every day, right? So when they actually get to the big events, that's when I get to be able to show them off.
Now, is there any some organizations are really tough to sort of get into, right? Is there like a technique you have? Do you just keep pounding on the doors day after day to get in where you want or get the access that you want?
Show up, be consistent, be trustworthy. That's really all it is. Like, and it's being there long term. I have a friend who has been working for the Stampeders for years, and after 4 years, she goes, "Nobody even knows me." And I said, "You know what? You gotta stick with it, right?" And that's the thing. I've been doing this for 10 years, and finally, I know pretty much everybody that I need to know. And there's a comfort level now too that when I see somebody new in the gym, "Hi, I'm Dave. I come with the place." I'll get some photos for you.
Well, that's good. All right. What else we got here? Well,
that was right before the high school volleyball team photo at St. Mary's.
Oh, yeah?
Just down the road. Yeah. So it's one of the only photos I still have left, but I thought that one was funny.
And that's you? That's amazing, Dave. That's impressive.
Yeah, I'm good. No, that was from Lake Louise back in 2013. It was a good shot. I knew I had it when I had it, and so I actually sent it away to Sportsnet. I had no relationship with Sportsnet magazine. I just sent it to their photo editor and said, I know you got a gallery going, maybe consider this. And that's John Kuchera. The significance is that was his first race back in a few years because he annihilated himself on that course.
Oh.
Like bone through skin suit kind of
That's not good.
thing. So that was his first race back. So there was the significance there that nobody would really know otherwise.
No, to come back from an injury like that, this kind of a sport, that's incredible.
But ended up in the gallery section of Sportsnet magazine. So it's done really well for me, that photo. It's won me a few prizes. So the gold medal in the World Photographic Cup, the very first one. Last year at the World Sport Photography Awards, it got me a silver medal. But the interesting thing is that developed a relationship with Sportsnet, and they were the first ones to accredit me for Sochi.
Yeah.
So had I not sent that in,
who
knows how many games I'd be to.
Now, is it a huge thrill to get published?
Well, yeah, of course. Yeah, it's fun. The way it is now, like those ones, the galleries, the stuff in the magazines is fun because it's tangible. But a lot of the stuff that I've had published is just online because I'm just so busy right now that I send photos on to the next thing, right? So I don't go back and troll websites and see what's been used. Very rarely do I do that just because I don't have time. Okay. So, I send them to them, they use them how they want, and we carry on. But stuff like that's nice. That was my first double truck.
Well, that and you get the recognition, it is a stepping stone, right? It does build you up a lot more. Yeah.
The key thing is, like, that start was the road to the Olympics for the first ones. So that's that about me. It's just not much to tell. It's just, this is what I do. This is what I love doing. I don't know what I'd do if I didn't have this. Probably be collecting change on a highway in New Jersey.
I have more faith in you than that, Dave. More faith in you than that. So yeah, let's talk about the Olympics because that's like a dream for so many photographers, right? Like that's the big show for amateur sport. It doesn't get any bigger than that. So you've been to 4 different Olympics now?
Yeah.
And a ton with 6 different Paralympics, right?
Yeah.
All right.
And it's the Olympics for photographers too, right? Like it's competition amongst the photographers because everybody's like trying to shoot the same thing. Because I mean, it's hard to stand out there because you're side by side with so many people that you're just there, right? And it's like, how do you make something that's unique or different?
Interesting. So with your very first Olympics, was it a huge learning curve for you, or did you kind of know what to expect? I mean, you have a lot of friends that are in this business as well.
Well, so my first games was London Paralympics. So I got a lay of the land. I understand that going to games like these is really an exercise in inconvenience, and you have to plot and plan and make sure you can get around. Transport is usually the limiting factor for getting around. But the sports I knew, basically getting around it, I figured out. So it's just you plot and plan. I built a spreadsheet of all the things that I wanted to cover, like trying to nail down all the athletes, because the Sport Institute in Calgary, we support mostly Winter Olympians and Paralympians. So we sent over half the team to all these games, right? So I think we had a gala last night, and I think one of the stats was that for Beijing, we contributed to 49% of all the medals won.
Oh, wow.
So, like, through support services.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Yeah. So that's good. This was Pyeongchang. This was pre-COVID. You can see in the front 3 rows, it's all photographers. I think that's Leah Hennel right there. But, yeah, it's like this is a lot of what the games used to be like. It's you know, everybody's jammed in. And
so that's got to be tough, though, to be creative when you're packed in like that.
It is.
Right?
It is, for sure.
I mean, how do you set yourself apart, or what are your options?
They're limited. You have to pay attention to make sure you get the right moments, right? There's no, you don't spend any time chimping, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Like you either got the shot or you didn't, right? So, you know, once your exposure is good, like you're indoors all the time. Like the settings are basically the same in every venue you go to.
I don't know what that was.
Hopefully not my pacemaker.
So this is a live show. Anything can happen. I don't know what that was.
But yeah, it's hard to stand out, but there are ways. Like this is the photo positions that you're given. Like the one that I just showed you was A.
Yeah.
And D and B, and that's where you go, right? Because there's paying people with tickets.
Now, when they set up these photo pits, do they know that this is the best angles for photographers to work from? So there's a lot of thought that goes into it.
Yeah, there's venue photo managers who are generally they've been around a long time and they're photographers themselves. But you know, there's the organizing committee and the IOC. They get together and they decide where they want all these photo positions to be, and they're semi-flexible sometimes.
Are some events way more flexible? I mean, if you're doing...
Yeah, for sure. There's only so many spots you can be for hockey or for figure skating or things like that. But cross-country skiing, there's a lot of places you can wander. You know, curling, you're fairly limited. But, I mean, it's changing angles and looking for different things. And like, especially with curling, because you get bored after your first few shots, so you just start wandering the rink looking for different things to shoot.
It is possibly the most exciting sport that Canada's ever produced.
Yeah.
No, you know.
Exactly.
If you ask my parents, that's it.
Yeah.
They live and breathe curling. But
I know some curling photographers, and I bless them, and I couldn't do it. So. But yeah, it is hard to get different photos sometimes, but it can be done. And then COVID hit.
Oh, geez.
Yeah. It changed everything. Like you would just show up. Once you're accredited and you're there, you can go to whatever events you want. You don't. In Tokyo, we had to pre-register for events and be approved to get into some events. And it was no problem as long as you had somebody from your country competing in it. I got rejected twice for rock climbing only because for the finals because our athletes didn't make it that far. So they said, no, sorry, you can't come.
Now, do you find that COVID made it easier to shoot or harder to shoot?
Well, it was way easier to get around, but there were a lot more hoops to jump through. So even just starting to get to the games, it was like 4 hours in the the airport in Tokyo, just waiting to get your test because you couldn't leave without a negative test. And then you had to quarantine for 3 days, and then you were restricted to media buses for the first 14 days. And even the taxis were hermetically sealed, and you're spitting in tubes every day to get your PCR tests.
Wow.
There's a lot on the line if you got COVID. But Tokyo was pre-Omicron, so it was a little bit easier. But I mean, that's what the events look like. They were empty stadiums.
So it's got to be kind of surreal. I mean, if you've been to several Olympics before, and it's like, there's got to be the power of the crowd and the excitement of the crowd and
for sure.
chanting, right? And you've got a bunch of photographers clicking away.
I'll never forget the London Paralympics, like the athletics in that. They packed 83,000 spectators a night in for Paralympic athletics. It was just crazy. So you go from that to this, completely empty. And, I talk to the athletes all the time, and they go, it was just bizarre. Like for the Tokyo opening ceremonies, most of them just came in and went straight out the back door because nobody sat in the stands for the opening. So if you were one of the first countries in, you're standing around for 2.5 hours waiting for all the countries to come in.
Jeez.
And it started looking more like a refugee camp than than an opening ceremony. So yeah, it was so much easier to get around, but it just wasn't the same. Like there was no vibe, and even in Beijing, where they could have some fans, it still didn't feel like the games. There were exceptions, like the top left photo is the marathon, and there were fans there for that. It was great because it was on the streets of Tokyo. There were all kinds of people holding signs that said, "Nothing to see, move along." But everybody would just ignore that and
well, everybody knows what's
just
going
watch.
on.
Yeah. So for the marathon, triathlon, so anything that was on the road, like the road cycling race, there were fans. And the velodrome was outside of Tokyo, so they were allowed to have 50% capacity. Okay. So it was good, but you know what? Still, we had our photo positions, and we couldn't just wander around because broadcasting didn't want to see some guy with a camera sitting in the stands ruining their perfectly bland background. So. Oh, this the bottom right one, that was funny. That was at softball. That was at the very beginning. They were doing rock, paper, scissors for photo positions. It was crazy. It was lotteries, or it was just bizarre because the venue photo manager didn't want you to move around. Like once you had your spot, that's where you stayed for the whole game. You could sneak around a little bit, but you also didn't want to ruin it for everybody else.
So with you guys all sort of packed into these photo pits and these photo spots, is there like a lot of jostling for position? Is there some anger, some elbows going out there? Rarely. Everybody there is pretty professional. Like if you need something, you can squeeze in for the most part. Like if it's really jammed, it's a little bit harder, especially if you're on the go. Like I was constantly going to different events, right? You get your Canadian athletes and then you move on to the next event. There's people who are there all day and they have the prime photo positions, and sometimes they don't move, right? So a lot of times when you actually get there, you have to deal with what you get, right? Because some photo positions will be full. Yeah.
Yeah, spitting in tubes every day. That was your testing. And then normally this is the riser in swimming. And in any normal Olympics, it's jammed, completely jammed. But you had to space out. And this was the finish line platform at athletics. So that's typical for every games. But, the lack of people, and, you had to space out a little bit. But they wanted us to socially distance the whole time, but when it came to buses, it just jam in. So it was... And then the treats of the games.
Those look
fresh
fantastic.
Coffee. Yeah, fresh
it's
coffee.
Not just coffee, it's fresh coffee.
Yeah. But those, the egg salad sandwiches from the Lawsons, unbelievable. Yeah. Like the white bread, and yeah, they're just so good.
And you carry around like granola bars and stuff, right? Like you always have some power bars or something?
Yeah, I always have my bars. I have Starbucks coffee, the little instant stuff. Those are good for bartering too. And BioSteel, the sport drink.
Yeah.
So yeah, I always have lots of stuff. Peanut butter is hard to find in Asia.
Oh.
So yeah. So and then this was every day you have an app. It was just constant apps and testing and everything like that. But once you were cleared, that was the best day in Tokyo, because after 14 days, here's your transit pass.
And away you
off
go.
you go. Yeah, so you could get around so much easier. If you miss a media bus, you wait 60 minutes. If you miss a subway train, you wait 3 minutes.
Yeah.
So and it's just so much easier to get around. So that was good, and I was able to do that through the Paralympics as well. Even though a lot of the staff, they were quarantined, they were all locked up. So there actually was discussion about whether I should do that, but I said no. They agreed that I could go, which was great. Yeah. Then there was Beijing. I stopped skating, playing fat old guy hockey just before Christmas, just so I wouldn't get COVID. Because if you got COVID within 30 days of the games, it was dicey getting there. Like CBC, if you had COVID, you're not going.
Jeez.
So
I mean, there's a lot on the line here, right? Like this is.
oh yeah, for sure. So up the nose, which was always a treat. I ended up testing positive for COVID on the 28th. I was negative. I did 2 rapid tests on the 27th. They were both negative. I was in on the 28th,
Right.
2 headshots for freestyle, and I was walking around with my strip, and Izzy's going, it's positive. So.
Jeez.
So
So did your heart just sink at that point?
Oh yeah. You stop drinking. You start doing everything you can possibly do to get that stuff out of you. But I was already triple vaccinated, so after 14 days, I still tested slightly positive, but 17 days I was negative. I needed 2 negative PCR tests 8 days before travel to send it into Tokyo or to Beijing to get approved.
Wow.
And then you're still testing when you get on the plane, because we flew on the COC charter. And then, so you do a rapid test, and if that comes positive, they have everything they need to do a full PCR test there, and then on the plane, off you go. And then as soon as you get there, you don't, that was the worst test I had. Because they did an up the nose swab and a back of the throat swab, thankfully with different swabs. But they, like the skin's poking out on the back of your neck, it's just like, stop moving. And it's like, you're poking my brain. So it was, again, more health codes and customs codes and all that stuff. But once you got through, it was great. I mean, everyday life, there's always a guy in a white suit. I mean, it's
Very
like,
that's another sort of surreal moment, right? You're not in a white suit.
Yeah.
They are. You're
Yeah.
like, what's going on?
yeah, it was crazy.
So here's when we went to prison or something.
Yeah, so that's all the hotels. You're fully sequestered for your entire time there. So 49 days, you're behind 8-foot walls. So they had security on the inside, police on the outside. The only way in and out was either to Shawshank your way out or take a bus to the venues, right? So and you were basically a victim of the restaurant in your hotel.
So this is a big time commitment for you, right? I mean, in 49 days, like you're just away from your regular life.
Yeah. But in reality, this is my regular life, right? It's just a different location. We had very few food options. Like the media center food was terrible. The running theme of the games was overcooked eggs and undercooked bacon. In fairness, I didn't try the shredded pig ears. But every day we drove by Zhang Manyi Donkey Burger. And
There's
never
nothing
got
like
to
a
go.
good donkey burger.
Yeah. And somebody looked it up. It's actual donkey.
Yeah.
So
It's good stuff.
yeah, good stuff. So yeah,
So it's like amazing adventures, though.
it is, but it's still bizarre, right? Like these 2 guys were marching up and down a ski hill, guarding it, and nobody was using it, right? Like it was completely unused, but these guys would march up a little bit, stop, march up a little bit, stop, turn around, march down. It was crazy. But it's all about the games, right? Once you're like all that stuff aside, it's all about the games. So when you go and you see all the people that you know,
Because you've been training
Competing.
with these people, right? You've been with these people for years.
yeah.
Right? So you really know them better than most people
Well,
do.
yeah, and there's stories there too. So the wrestler Erica, she won gold in Rio, right? So this was a big deal for her, and it went completely south. Her first match, she was out, and then the repechage never happened. So her Olympics was short-lived. This one, but I mean, it's part of it, right?
Yeah.
They accept that. The rower in the middle on the bottom, she's local. That's Kasia. She crashed her bike before the games, broke her collarbone.
Shit.
And she was like terrified. I heard her speak to Bonas High School the other day. And it's like when you see her, I saw her diving too. You can see the plate that's
wow.
here. So she had to do a row off to make the Olympic team, and she won it, and then off they went. Like, she's still recovering from her injury, and they won gold.
Wow.
So
that's a great story.
Yeah. Like fencing and like, this is what it's all about. At the end of the day, it's all about the athletics. I have, all the stuff that you put up with is all worth it for this. This photo I was just lucky to get in. Normally for athletics you need a high demand event ticket, but I went to the ticketing office and I said, "Do you have a ticket?" And they said, "Sure." So I just went there to go see DeGrasse run, and the guy next to him, that's where he pulled up and went lane. So you can see he's totally in his lane. And this was the semifinal, so he could have been out if he was just a little bit slower. But
so that's kind of interesting. Stuart Hampton says, "Can you ask Dave, that's you, this Dave, what factors does he look for when taking sports photos that tell a story? Is there one certain factor? Is the backstory that you want to tell or get out, or is it the moment of the photo tells the whole story?"
Sometimes it does. Sometimes it doesn't. I'll get a little bit more into this, but for me, a lot of it's building relationships, right? Like, that's where it's in the gym. It's talking to athletes, like, reading the news and making sure you keep up with these guys, and knowing what the stories are ahead of time. It's just paying attention, really.
Right.
And paying attention, like for wheelchair volleyball and stuff like that, it's like getting photos of everybody, right? Because there are some guys that never see the light of day. Some of the photos that I have that get the most use are the one shift a guy had in Lima at the Pan Am Games, because that was the only shift he played. But again, it's all about the games, and there's so many good photos to be made. There's
now, how many people, do you work as part of a team with photographers? Are you there on yourself, or and how do you divvy up, if you are a team, who gets to shoot what?
Well, so for the Olympics, I go as the Canadian Sport Institute. So I'm on my own. Okay. I make my own schedule. I was working with the COC for Tokyo, so I was filing with them as well. But generally, I do my own thing, and just follow the athletes that I know I need to cover, right? So, because we support so many of them.
Right.
But like with the luge team, because I know all of them, their office is next to my office. I went up for their track walk, and that got a lot of. It was very difficult to get around in Beijing at first, the first week, because if you're in Beijing, you couldn't get anywhere. Like, sliding started at 9:30 in the morning. Well, the first bus of the 2.5-hour trip up there was at 8 o'clock. So by the time you get there, you missed pretty much everything, and to get home, you'd have to leave before the evening session started. So I shot a lot of stuff in town before, like curling, speed skating, hockey, ahead of time. But I did get some sliding in, speed skating, curling. But again, seeing the women's hockey team win the gold, that was great, because the last time I saw them smiling was in Sochi, because they lost all the world championships after that, except for Calgary.
Yeah.
But I was still in Tokyo, so I wasn't there for that. And then seeing Evany and Val and Izzy win the gold in the pursuit was great. And it's just nice seeing people do well.
So I was thinking about that. I mean, the gold medal game for the girls there, you've been working closely with these girls for years, and you've seen their heartbreak and disappointment. And I was wondering, I mean, do you ever get emotional when you're photographing these events? And or can you separate yourself and still keep shooting, or you're celebrating with them? Because you've been, you're kind of in a relationship with the whole team for years.
I don't get super emotional. Like, when I look at the photos afterwards, in slideshows and stuff like that, then sometimes it sinks in, or when you talk to them afterwards. But you're just happy for them, right? Like, I spent an hour on the ice after the girls won the gold, taking photos for them. It's like, Dave, I need a photo, because they know they'll get it too, right? Because they don't really know anybody else.
There's a gazillion photographers everywhere, right?
Yeah, and it's a constant theme. It doesn't matter how high profile your sport is; they never get photos, right? Because the COC is doing a better job of getting them photos. But I remember one of the figure skaters years ago asked for a photo of her from Sochi, from Getty Images. They wanted $800 US for it.
Wow!
And it's like, athletes don't have that kind of money.
No, so I think those people don't realize, a lot of these athletes, they are working jobs. They're they're hustling to pay for their sport.
Yep, exactly. So it's nice to have that relationship with them. So yeah. So anyways, that's the Olympic stuff. Anybody has questions about that?
What kind of gear do you bring to the Olympics? I mean, you're not really sure exactly what you're going to shoot all the time, right? Like, run me down a little bit of your gear list, unless you got that coming up. Oh, look at that. It's like we prepared this or something.
Yeah. That's what I took to the games. That was my Tokyo kit. 400-2.8, can't live without it. The wide angle lenses are not as useful at the games. Like even the 70-200
really?
It doesn't generally have enough reach. I don't use it a ton.
Interesting. That's like such a bread and butter lens for so many.
It is, but you're not always close, right? Like for award ceremonies maybe, but the 24-105 is maybe better for that. But generally you're not real close to the action. Like the higher the level of competition, like if you go from World Cups to World Championships to Olympics or to any of the multi-sport games, you're further from the action in general, right? Like speed skating, you can still do it, but yeah. So I keep it simple. Like usually a couple of wides and a couple of long ones, and the 200-600 is a brilliant lens for outdoor stuff, but especially I use it for freestyle skiing a lot because the backgrounds don't matter as much,
right?
Because it's either sky or white. But it's a brilliant lens for hand holding and moving quickly, right?
So that's kind of brings an interesting point because it is the slowest lens that you have, right? At 6.3. Graham Dodd actually says, what's acceptable noise? Even with fast glass, indoor, poor lighting, fast sports, it's a struggle.
It is. I mean, every day the sensors get better for noise.
Yeah.
I struggle with some, like up to like 6400 is perfectly fine. Because the noise doesn't matter as much as what's actually in the photo. That said, one of the tricks that I learned a long time ago is when I'm importing all my photos into Lightroom, I do a plus 30 noise reduction across the board, whether it's ISO 100 or 6400 or anything like that.
Interesting.
And then I have a preset that I apply to pretty much everything. So, but I do the noise reduction across the board, which really helps because as soon as you start sharpening stuff, then you're sharpening noise. So that's what I do.
And so that leads to another question. Isaac Akinley says, do you need to edit a lot for sport photography or do you keep everything basic and realistic?
If it's purely editorial, it's just basic processing and cropping. That's it. You're not like touching up stuff. A lot of times I have a different mandate rather than purely editorial. So I can have a little bit more flexibility with editing, but generally I keep it simple because I don't have time to spend 10 minutes on each photo or 5 minutes. It's a lot of times it's like 10-15 seconds a photo and on to the next one.
John Morris says, why the teleconverter, Dave? Doesn't that slow things down for you?
I don't have one. Oh, those ones. Yeah, the teleconverters. Yeah. I never used them.
Oh, no?
I had them just in case. Like there's sometimes where the 2x converter on a 400 is good. Like if you're shooting surfing. I shot surfing in Peru and you needed like a 1200 lens to get out, right? Because the better waves were further out. Maybe athletics the odd time, but if you're shooting at f4 or f5.6 instead of f2.8, it's not that big a deal outdoors, right? Like that's why the 5.6 to 6.3 works so well.
And so you got like a dream kit for photographers for Sony camera gear here, including the A1, which is a really impressive camera. I don't see any tripods or any other accessories. Do you use a tripod? Do you carry a monopod? Any accessories like that?
Monopod I use.
Yep.
Yeah. You don't use tripods at the games. That's a no-no. People make fun of you. But and the other ones are the little tiny Manfrotto tripods for remotes. But other than that, no, it's just a monopod. That's all you need. And a lot of times I hand hold stuff just because the action moves quick enough, that you just can't physically use a monopod. So
when you set up for a day, let's say you're doing speed skating or grand skiing or something like that, do you have a 3-camera setup that your go-to kit to start with?
Generally 2.
2?
Yeah, like I've seen guys that are, running around with 8 cameras on them. I don't know how they work that, but I usually have something long,
of course,
like my day-to-day stuff, I could live with a 400, 2.8, and a 14.
Really?
1.8. Yeah,
That extreme?
because I like to shoot either really, really tight or really wide.
That's crazy extreme, Dave.
But the 14, that's because I have access to the athletes,
100%.
right? So I can get in with them, and to use those properly, you have to get close to them. Otherwise, you know, the 24 to 105 or the, you know, it just varies.
I see you got an RX0 Mark II there.
Yeah, I didn't
That's
use it.
That's the oddball one in there.
Didn't use it.
It's a fantastic camera. But.
It is great, but it's like you're not allowed to shoot video there, right? That was just in case I shot some sailing, which I didn't do. So, but yeah, I generally keep it simple. I mean, you got to carry all this stuff too, right? I don't like wheels. They're just cumbersome, so I have a backpack and whatever I can fit in it with my laptop and that kind of thing. It's what you have for the day. Like sometimes if you're shooting a big event indoors and then a big event outdoors, then you might want the 2 long lenses, but it's still manageable, right? Because they're pretty light.
Yeah.
So yeah, but yeah, I mean, you can only do so much, and like a lot of times, like the 4 years leading up to these games, I'll show up at speed skating with 2 lenses and 2 bodies, and I make it work. So I know going into it what I really need.
Perfect. All right, let's carry on. Let's see what else. What's the next slide?
Next slide.
Next slide. Oh, photograph approach.
I did a blog post from Tokyo about, because people were asking how I do things. I shoot manual 100% of the time, except for focus, right? Because nobody's keeping up with autofocus these days. But the basic thing is I keep my exposure triangle right here, right? So shutter speed on the front, ISO in the first button here, and then aperture here. And
you've been doing this long enough. You don't even have to think about it anymore, right? It's just second nature for you.
And then beside the always back button focus. Always.
Interesting. So that's kind of a polarizing point for some people. Now, have you always shot back button focus since it's been available, or is it something
once I learned how to do it, I've never turned back.
Interesting. Do you find for sports and action, it's the way to go for you?
It is, because you can preset on something, right? Like as soon as you're pushing that button on the shutter button on the front, your focus is looking for whatever it wants. So I generally, like if there's something specific that I want, because there's traffic at these things too, right?
Fair, yeah.
Like if you're shooting biathlon from behind, like if you're at the gun range, there's athletes that are going back and forth all the time, and coaches and stuff like that. So if there's one shot you want, then you can pre-focus on that, and it'll still be in focus. It's the same thing like if you're I was shooting archery from the side, there's 100 archers, right? So if you pre-focus on something in front of them, like a little lane marker or something like that, and try and get them like that and shoot when you see them, because otherwise you can't.
Fair enough.
Right. But yeah, that's basically it. I let the camera do as little guesswork as possible. So I restrict my focus modes to like 2 or 3. Like you can take out all the ones that you don't want to use. So I use wide, I use the tracking, and I use the flexible spot, and that's basically all I need.
So in interior events, inside events, right, the lighting doesn't really change. It's the same consistent lighting.
Yeah.
I can totally see manual for that. Yeah. What about outside? If you're shooting where it's mixed lighting, do you ever go use aperture priority or anything like that? Always manual, 100% of the time? Always
manual, because I'd learned a long time ago. I was shooting cross-country skiing out at Canmore, and I was using aperture priority. So to get snow white, you have to overexpose by a stop in 2/3 or something like that. It's the same with hockey. Anything on snow, you have to overexpose to get the snow white. But if you set it up on aperture priority and you go plus, you exposure compensate, as soon as they're in the trees, then the trees are blown out, right? So if you set, like especially on snow, if you set it, it doesn't matter if they're in the air, against the trees, or on the snow. The exposure is always the same. And generally, if you go from sunny to cloudy, all you do is you adjust your shutter speed or your ISO, one of those 2 things, and it's quick to do.
Fair enough. So speaking of autofocus, actually, Carlos says, Carlos says, do you like using eye autofocus with sports? It's tricky because sometimes they're wearing masks and stuff.
Yeah. Generally, it's getting better every day, it seems, because you get that little, what they call in Sony the angry bees, the little green squares that that attack you. They work great. But a lot of times it's if they're wearing sunglasses or helmets or anything like that, a lot of times you have to work the autofocus, right? Like, because sometimes it'll get on their shoulders or whatever. But like, I keep working that back button focus on the face, and that usually works great.
Well, Sony's got the real-time autofocus tracking, which is a fantastic
it works
feature.
great. But it's still trying to find things to focus on. And if it doesn't have eyes, and if it doesn't have a face, which is really problematic with winter sports, then you keep working it, right? If you're far enough away, then all you have to do is get it on them. Like in skiing, I mean, the depth of field at 2.8 is that much from a couple hundred yards, so you're fine.
So with that shot you showed earlier of the skier there who was sort of a comeback story there, he was kind of coming over a hill there. Were you using autofocus at that point, or were you sort of trap shooting?
No, that was trap shooting, because I was with the Canon stuff back in the day. Okay. So that was, I think I had a 400 with a 2x converter on it, and like the autofocus between Sony and the old Canon stuff was night and day.
Yeah.
So that was focusing, 2-3 meters past the gate, and then when you see him, because it was blind too, right?
Yeah.
You couldn't see him coming, so you take 3 photos and the middle one works.
Perfect. Cool. And what he's got? You usually 1/800 shutter speed. Do you find yourself really practicing like panning and blurring?
I'm terrible at it. Yeah, you know what? Every once in a while I get a really nice pan, but I'm terrible at panning. I do it. Panning is like using a fisheye. You can only use so many photos, right? Like, because you can't have a whole series of photos that are just pans. It's like you can't have a whole series of photos that are just fisheyes, right? Like 1 or 2. So, like when there's certain races, you can try and do it. Like in the 10K speed skating race, you got 25 laps to do it, right? You get bored. So you
joined us in an episode where we were shooting speed skating there, and it was a lot of fun actually to try and show action, but actually show motion and work with blur to be creative. But
it can be done. I got some great ones from Beijing, but it's a lot of trial and error for me because I'm terrible.
Well, it's good. Yeah, you kind of know your strengths, know your weaknesses, right?
Yeah, I don't know. Like, I'm not the biggest fan of pans like all the time, like in some sports, but maybe it's just because I'm not good at it, but more than likely. So, yeah.
So a little as auto as possible. That pretty much sums up your shooting style.
Yeah, keep it simple. Any questions? Any more questions about that kind of stuff?
Lawrence asks, figure skating competitions are in white light, but what about gala shows when the various colored lights are swirling all over the place? How do you manage exposure? So if you have multiple lights being all over the place. There's not a lot of sports where they do that, but if you've got a challenging lighting situation where lighting does change a fair amount.
With the galas, though, it's usually spotlights, right? Mm-hmm. And so the spotlights are usually the same wherever they go. Sometimes you have to adjust a little bit. That's one of the nice things about shooting in RAW too, is that you can pull back the highlights if you overexpose or underexpose. I generally try and overexpose, like shoot to the right. What do they call it? Shooting from the right?
Shoot to the right?
Yeah, shoot to the right. Like I prefer to overexpose a little bit than underexpose, because in post you get more noise bringing it back up. But
Carlos also asked earlier, kind of that point there, do you tweak the camera's creative styles and color profiles to achieve a certain look or saturation with your images?
No, because the only thing I'll do is I'll shoot different white balance.
Oh, really?
Every once in a while. Like to get that late afternoon glow, the magic hour type stuff, I'll increase the ISO sometimes, or the white balance, the temperature. But other than that, it's like, no, I don't bother with any of that stuff in camera, because I'll forget how I did it, and when I go back to reset it, it's like you're missing all the action, right? So if I do it, it would be in post.
Oh, fair enough. All
right. So this is everything about sports photography. The only 3 things you have to remember.
Okay.
Peak action, good light, clean backgrounds. And the last one's the hardest one to get. Especially the lower the level of the event, the more junk you have in the background. I don't know how many times I've moved garbage cans out of the way of things, or I make myself at home, but when I'm working with people at the marathon, because I shoot the Calgary Marathon, and I have a couple of excellent staff with me. But you know, I've had other people that come, and it's like no parked cars, no garbage cans, no porta potties, no construction. You know, like it's up to you to find a clean shot, right?
Well, that's the thing a lot of people don't realize, is that you don't realize how distracting these elements can be until you can't stop looking at them.
Yeah.
Right? Once you see certain things, like a garbage can, you just can't stop looking at it.
Yeah.
You know?
So there's ways around it. Like one of my favorite ways is shoot low and wide, right? Like the biathlon, right? The mountains are nice, but what was just below the horizon was buildings,
Yeah.
right? So you get down, you shoot up, or like up on the catwalk where I wasn't supposed to be, you shoot down. But it's changing angles, or one thing I found shooting gymnastics, like the floor routine for me was, I don't shoot the jumps and flips and stuff because they're unflattering. That's more of the posy stuff, right?
Yeah.
So I would shoot that with a 400 from the side of the mat. So you're shooting super tight, but the background just completely melts away. So it totally cleans that up.
Even if you have a busy background, using depth of field
Yeah.
certainly helps that out.
But even, you know, that said, even like at the higher ends, like the backgrounds are generally pretty good. But this was one of the Beijing photos I used, but that's the background. Like the photo positions at cross country were terrible. Like they were all shooting down. It was all parking lots, tents, because the infrastructure at the bottom of these things is crazy. This was one that I really worked hard to get this shot. It was at biathlon, and there was a little strip that was dark, and then there was all kinds of railing that was blue in front. So I basically crouched down and got a little bit of the blue, and then the black, and took a few of those. So this is another good example of when you want to just use back button focus, because you know you're trying to get the shot on the gun or on the shell, right? So you pick a spot like on the edge of a sunglasses or something like that, focus, and then go, because there's traffic. There's coaches in front of you, there's broadcaster in front of you, there's skiers going all the time. So it can be done, but it's challenging sometimes.
Always a challenge, yeah, with big events.
Yeah. So the three things that, like, I got super obsessive about backgrounds, you know, a couple of years into the sports shooting, and like you just get consumed by it, right?
Well, I think it's like any craft, right? You start seeing the nuances and what makes a good shot a great shot. And so you just become better and better at your craft, and you see things at a higher level than other people do.
Yeah. Well, and yeah, it's again easier at some places than others, but even still at the games, you're getting so particular. Like, do you crouch down or do you stand up? Because, you know, in speed skating, the top of the bumper, there's photographers and cameras. So do you want to get low and shoot right into their eyes, or do you want to get a little bit higher, right? So, but it's more than shooting action. That's what the point of this whole slide is. When especially when you're working for somebody, they want more than just action. Like, I remember years ago, the president of Luge said, last thing I need is somebody going by like this, right? You need one of those. Like a speed skater going around a corner, you only need one. I told a friend of mine, and he told me in China, he said, you know, this always stuck with me, is get the shot you need and then have fun. Right.
I've heard that before, and it's a really, really good advice, because in these events too, you know, it's the emotion you really want to bring out. Yeah. So it's the when they finish the finish line, cross the finish line, or they win gold or something, right? Suddenly. Yeah. Exactly. Suddenly, those are the photos that live on forever.
But sometimes you're limited too, right? So when I got to bobsleigh, there were.
I don't know what that is.
Pacemaker. So when I got to bobsleigh, I had 2 runs. So the one shot I needed for everybody was the sled going by the Beijing logo. Yeah. Right? And then you go to the finish line. So I didn't have time to play, right? The bobsleigh track there was great, but you got to get what you need, right? At the expense of being artsy. You know, the more time you spend, then the more fun you can have. But you also need more than just action, right? You need to tell a story. Right, so you need to get some photos that have a sense of place, like where are you at, what's going on. You need to have jubilation for sure. You need to have emotion, whether it's good or bad. Yeah. You know, details are always good. Close-ups, tight shots on different details that bring people into the event. Like, that's why I like shooting with the 400 so much, is because it brings you into the action, right? most people see it at 50 millimeter vision,
Yeah.
right? So 8 times closer is different, right? But one of the big things is portraits, especially in winter sports. I keep harping on people about, you got to have a portrait of somebody, right? And it, like, portraits are easy to do. Like, this was CBC director, right? Like, that one photo tells a big story, right?
Yeah.
You know where it is. You know it's a big deal. You know the guy's good. You know, it's clean.
Actually, go back to that previous slide there. That shot there. John Morris is this the shot of the Canadian team before a game or at a practice?
No, that's before a game. So this was, they centralized, this was probably before Pyeongchang. But because I was working with them so much, you know, I was able to go and do these kind of things. I was shooting for Hockey Canada for these. So before the game, you can go on the ice and shoot like the national anthem. You shoot the referees. You shoot the anthem singer, because you need all that stuff, because those are the ones you always get asked for.
Yeah.
But this one, it was, I just threw a camera on the bottom, like right in the circle. They always come into the huddle before the game, and you just fire away. I'm like right behind the net there.
So it's kind of like a self-portrait, but a hockey team got in the way.
Yeah, exactly. So that's just being familiar with the girls and having that in with the team, right? To be able to go and do that.
Yeah.
Not everybody can do that.
That's a very cool shot. I'm not a huge fan of fisheyes, but certain
On occasion.
situations it works well.
Yeah, but you don't want to overuse it. Storytelling, very important. So details, a sense of place. You know, Kingsbury, I saw a photo of him on Instagram just recently with all his crystal globes on his table. He's got 20 some
Oh,
of
yeah?
them. Yeah, it's just ridiculous. But he would always put a new sticker on the back of his helmet every year, right? You know, sometimes you can clean up photos like the bobsled one. You get bored and you get artsy. So
It's not the first time I've heard that from photographers.
Yeah.
You get bored, you get artsy.
But even the curtains, this was before a game, like the hockey game, and they had these big curtains with the rings on.
No, I love that shot because it really gives you a sense, right? The nervousness before you go on,
Yeah.
right? Like before the show.
There's tension in it.
Yeah.
But special moments, right? The one of Evany and Conrad kissing. I was actually just making my way through the Oval to catch a bus, and I saw them out there. I know them, and I knew they were dating. He's Hungarian, she's Canadian. So I snapped that photo and hashtag it Olympic kissy face. And the IOC used it. Like they retweet whatever, re-insta it.
I mean, how has
regrammed.
you're an old guy like me. How has social media changed how you shoot or how you show your stuff off on Instagram, Twitter? Are you a multimedia kind of guy?
I have an Instagram account. Twitter, I'm terrible at. I mean, frankly, I'm not that great on Instagram either. I use it more for following the athletes than posting my own stuff. During the pandemic, I posted more just because you're trying to stay relevant. But where I'm at with what I do, I don't need to promote myself a lot, right? It's just nice to show off photos. That's really all I use it for. Is just making, keeping people back home up with what's going on. But the emotion, the jubilation, the luge winning gold or the silver in Pyeongchang, that was a huge moment. That was a highlight for me because I know what they've been through. So for them to win a medal.
Oh yeah, I've been down the bobsled track here, not on the luge, but the dedication, and it's one of the hardest sports to actually train for because ice time is so tough.
Yeah.
I mean, they're lucky to get 2 to 3 runs in a night as a practice.
Yeah. And luge is one of those ones, like if you're 12 years old and you want to get into it, you're probably too late already.
Really?
Yeah, because it's one of those ones you need runs, right? So it's a hard sport. It's like bobsleigh, they poach guys from football and track and field and stuff like that, right? And same with skeleton, they're like, kids don't do it, but kids do luge, right? So it's weird how those sports differ like that. Emotion, I tell people, go look through magazines and see what they use, right? It's all that kind of stuff. Very little action, but the portraits is a big one, right? And it doesn't have to be like a headshot or anything. Like that was Caitlin Osmond warming up before figure skating trials. Damian Warner was just in our gym. I said, don't move. And he just smiled, and it's a great portrait.
Yeah,
Right?
it is a good, yeah.
That's the doctor from the Olympic team. That's Dr. Mike, and nobody has any photos of him, right? So that was the only one I had of him. This was in Peru at Pan Am Games. She'd washed down a little bit. Instead of coming out on the beach, she came out on these rocks and just stopped. And
It's gorgeous. I mean, it's
Yeah.
like the background is super clean because it's nothing but clouds and overcast.
the whole games, the entire time down there, it was like that. It was brutal.
So adding some foreground
Yeah.
it certainly adds a sense of place.
But I keep bugging snowboarding. Like these photos are useless for figuring out who's who, right? Like Liam Burley, it's a good thing I know who he is, because like, how's that any help to anybody? So, I mean, especially in winter sports, portraits are important.
And do you find like some athletes are way more open to having like, an official portrait done than others?
They all want it. They all
Really?
need it. Yeah, like some more than others, but you know, they need them, right? They need them for, especially if they're like the hockey girls are all coming to me right now. Normally they have a photo session after the Olympics, but they didn't have it this year because of COVID. So they're all coming to me, all the local ones, saying, "Can I get just headshots?" Like Emerance Mashmeyer, she's got a bus stop now. I think they named a road after her in Bruderheim, right? So they like Bruderheim wants photos, right? So she came in. I was set up for staff headshots or a pride shoot, and I just need a couple, so got her those, but they need them. But again, like, look and see what gets used. Environmental shots, like very few of the photos in these magazines will be action. It'll be portraity type stuff. Like ski magazines are notorious for like super wide,
Yeah.
you know, where the guy's just a speck. You know, family, jubilation, all that kind of stuff. That's important too. This is a difference, a little bit different. Like it's so much easier to shoot outdoors than indoors. You know, pretty much any camera and lens will work.
Well, that
Right.
kind of brings a point. I mean, here in Canada, we have winter 10 months of the year. So how do you deal with the extreme cold? I mean, what's the coldest you've had to actually shoot outside?
Yeah, cameras freeze. They do. Or when you bring them inside, they fog up. You have to be careful with that kind of stuff. It's rare, but it does happen. Like if you're shooting skiing on the side of the hill and you're stuck there, you get cold.
Now, do you
Right.
bring like hot pockets, or do you bring any kind of gear that keeps you warm? Heated gloves, heated vests?
Like I'm used to being outdoors, so I have. I don't use heated stuff. I layer well with merino wool and that kind of stuff. I did the pocket hand warmers. I got these ones off Amazon. They're brilliant. They're rechargeable and they get hot. So those are good to keep your hands warm. Gloves, I buy mitt shells to keep your hands warm.
Yeah.
Because that really helps a lot. But
Because it's tricky to operate a camera with gloves on, right? And so
Yeah.
there are some specialized gloves and some mitts that we sell that are a little thinner on the fingers, where you can pop the finger off. But when it's cold, right?
Yeah,
And you're
and
not
it's- and
moving
it's metal,
necessarily.
right?
Yeah.
So it's like keeping your gear warm is one thing. So I usually bring a lot of towels, and that kind of helps keep the snow out of the bag too. But a lot of times you just have to deal with it. Same thing with rain, right? Sony gave us rain covers in Beijing and Tokyo, which were lifesavers.
Yeah.
Because they're hard to find otherwise.
Well, I mean, people, I do a lot of lens reviews and stuff, and they're like, okay, this is a weather-resistant lens or a body. And for the most part, they can hold up, but I think you're just tempting fate.
Oh, for sure.
If you're just going to continuously expose it to the elements, so a little bit of precaution goes a long ways.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, like I flooded a lens in Pyeongchang. The one day I didn't have my towel, because one thing I use sometimes is those golf towels that are dry on the inside, wet on the outside. So you can dry and just put them over top. Because
That's
I
a good
don't
idea.
like the giant covers like that are this big.
Yeah.
Like the Sony ones that they gave out, they're great. But a lot of times just a towel, or if you forget your rain cover, then a towel works pretty well. But the one day I forgot it, it was the big chunky wet snow, and it flooded the inside of my 200
Oh,
to
geez.
400. So, but thankfully, Pro Services are at the games. So, yeah. Indoors always tricky. Especially if you're hand holding. I do a lot. Image stabilization only get you so far, but Monopods work great, and just boost the ISO.
No, when I'm talking about photography, especially with longer lens, I like preach shutter speed, right? You know, people don't realize, you know, how much a long telephoto really exaggerates your camera shake, and you really need to compensate for that.
Yeah, yeah. The longer the lens, the more you see it.
100%.
Yeah. Yeah, but faster lenses help too. So the 135 1.8, the new Sony one, love it. Can't live without it. I use it all the time now.
Now, what if you don't have a 400 2.8 budget, right? You know, the 2 to 600 is a fantastic lens like that. But what if you're still working with like a crop sensor camera? Is there any lenses you kind of recommend, or you?
Well, the primes for sure.
Yeah.
Like you can get fast primes, right? Primes will always be faster than zooms. So like the 135 1.8 or the 50 or the 85 1.2, they're great lenses, and and they'll work, right? But you can also pick your spot. Like I could shoot indoors with a 5.6, but you have to pick your spots. Like in hockey, you're not going to get the fast shots, but you'll get the face-offs, right? You know, you'll get a lot of that stuff in between the whistles. You get the coaches, you get the bench, and that kind of thing, and you might get some action, like goalies covering up the puck or making saves. It can be done. You just have to try different things, and don't let it limit you.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes actually the crop sensor cameras give you that more reach.
Oh, for sure.
Have you thought about doing that, running like you got all full frame cameras, but to run like a 6600 along with your gear, just to have sort of a...
No, but what I do is one of the buttons on the back of my camera, I set to switch from full frame to APS-C. I find it helps with focus, right? Like if you're trying to pick one person out of a crowd, rather than having that extra reach, you sacrifice sensor size, but it works.
So is there like a resolution that you're comfortable shooting down to, or do you love the big res files? I mean, shooting the A1, it's a beast of a camera as far as resolution and performance. But do you find the file size is great? It allows you to crop more aggressively?
Well, right now I'm using my 14 on the A1.
14.
Just yeah, the wide ones I put on the A1 now because I can crop so much tighter, and it works great. The long lenses I put on the A9, the A9 II. Yeah, and that works fine too. So
have you ever had like an organization complain about file size?
No, most people don't know. I send all my files out usually at 3,000 pixels long side, and you know that'll print a really nice 8x10. And frankly, I've sent them out to Winsport and they printed billboards with them. So it works. Like 3,000 is plenty, right? So anything more, people can't handle, right? You can't email them. You can't. You can't put them on social, and people have a hard time down-resing them. So 3,000 seems to be a nice sweet spot.
Interesting. Carlos is on fire here tonight in the chat room here. He says, I shoot with a mirrorless camera now for sports, but sometimes miss the truly lag-free optical viewfinder of my DSLRs for shooting action. Is there anything in specific that Dave misses from older generation cameras? Or because the new generation stuff is so like amazing, this evolution of technology.
Yeah.
Right? It makes certain things easier, but do you miss an optical viewfinder?
No.
No?
No. Not really. I like, you know, when the digital stuff was first coming out, like the mirrorless, I was a fairly late adopter. I mean, because what was it, 2017? So the A9 was the first mirrorless that I had, and I found it to be pretty good. Mm-hmm. You know, there's always some give and take, right, in everything with photography, right? Like, you know, if you want a better ISO, you have to give up something, right? And to have a mirrorless, you know, like the mirrorless is instant, but the DSLRs are instant, but the mirrorless isn't that far behind. So a little bit of lag, I don't usually deal with that now.
And the fact that you shoot manual all the time,
yeah.
Do you find the electronic viewfinder with exposure preview is like a lifesaver? Like it's just a game changer compared to shooting with an optical DSLR.
Yeah, for sure. So I do all my exposure inside, and I just adjust what I need to here on like either ISO or shutter speed. I usually don't. I usually shoot wide open, so I don't have to worry about that. The only time I really, you know, adjust the aperture is when I'm shooting portraits or like groups, or trying to get a different depth of field kind of thing. But
yeah, when it comes to ISO, some of these cameras are capable of, 6400 ISO is really clean nowadays with these higher end cameras. Is there an absolute limit that you won't shoot past?
I don't usually get in a situation where I'm over 6400 or 8000.
So let's say you're stuck without the 400 2.8 or fast prime lens. You have to shoot the 2 to 600 or 6.3. What is the maximum ISO that you're willing to go to?
I've never really tried it. I've shot 128,000 before, but they kind of get unusable because if it's that dark, there's no light and it's just super grainy.
No, fair
but usually for sports, there's some kind of light, right? I hope I answered. What was Carlos's question for the first time? Because I don't think I answered it.
About shooting an optical viewfinder. Do you miss something from the older generation cameras?
Not really. They're heavier. They're slower, right? Like it's the way I look at it now is bodies are basically disposable. The lenses you keep forever, but the bodies, every couple of years, they're so much better that I don't miss it.
How about this?
But the one thing, before I forget, the silent shutter is for sure will keep me into mirrorless. Because having that noisy shutter, because like shooting golf or shooting press conferences or anything like that.
Well, electronic shutters certainly changed certain sports,
yeah.
Big time. Now, how do you find 30 frames a second? Did you think 20 frames a second was ludicrous and 30 frames a second is even more? Or do you love the fact that you have that kind of flexibility?
It doesn't really matter to me because I don't go crazy. I don't spray and pray.
Okay.
I shoot enough sports that I know the timing that I want. Like if somebody's in a half pipe, I can shoot them facing me. I have fairly good control over what I'm shooting and what I'm seeing. So the 30 frames a second when you're shooting 5 frames helps, but not a great deal, right? Like I've stood next to guys on the side of the ski hill who are from other countries. We're notorious for this. I saw slalom skiers. This guy just hammered the shutter from the moment he saw him till the moment he was gone. And it's like, did you get it? But it's just because of what I do. I have much more discipline, right? To know the spots that I want. So
well, I know myself, I thought 30 frames was over the top, but I'm finding it's changed how I shoot certain sports. Instead of, for instance, somebody running with a basketball, right? I don't care when the basketball is hitting the floor during a dribble. Doesn't look like, it's not a good shot at all. But in the past, I would just mash the shutter and just go, right? 10 frames a second. Now I wait until the ball's in the hand and I can feather my shutter just for those moments. So I have a similar amount of shots during the sequence, but more keepers.
It's nice to have, for sure. I mean, like you get way more keepers out of having that flexibility, just because there's a certain extra moment that you get that you never used to.
So this brings up another point, though, is in your workflow, right? And when you're shooting an event like this and you've got thousands of shots, how do you call them? Right? How many Red Bulls do you drink to call your images after the Olympics?
ISAs. Yeah, session L's, so they're a little bit later. I use Photo Mechanic. I have a little bit on workflow later, but
jumping ahead.
I use Photo Mechanic. If you don't use Photo Mechanic, you should get it. Like if you shoot a lot, because I use it for captioning and culling. So once everything's ingested, it's basically the T button and the arrow, like tag, right, next, tag, next. And then you can take all the tagged ones, import them into Lightroom, and then all the untagged ones, you can just delete them.
So you actually delete everything. You don't save everything.
I've started purging like crazy.
Interesting.
Yeah. Like if I'm not going to use them, like I have so many photos as it is. Like anything that's possibly good, I'll keep, or I can possibly use. It doesn't mean I will, but I keep it. Anything that I don't, I won't. Like I'm starting to get it because I'm running out of so much.
Data management's a massive thing. When you're shooting 30 frames a second at 50 megapixels like the A1 can do, it adds up quick.
Oh, fill in hard drives. That's all I'm doing right now.
Are you carrying more and more memory cards than ever before?
Yeah, just different cards. But again, I try and temper my shooting. I just don't go crazy and fill cards. We've already talked about that kind of stuff.
So that looks horrible.
Yeah, it's shooting in the winter is tough. Sony knows this about where the lens release button is, because it's right under your glove finger. Like when you have a glove on, it comes off semi-regularly, and that's what happened there. Was I had the camera strap on the 400, and somehow the body came off and it ended up in the snow. And taking care of stuff, especially on ski hills, especially freestyle stuff, is important because it's loaded with chemicals. They use salt. I saw them preparing the slalom course in Wengen or someplace. Fire hoses and buckets of salt.
Oh, really?
That's what they use to firm it up. And the Moguls jumps. The Moguls jumps in at Windsport. They use fertilizer to keep them steady. So clean your stuff off afterwards.
Yeah, anything with salt is a killer on camera gear. So do you carry around like a filter, a sensor cleaning kit with you? Right? Are you comfortable doing that on the side of a ski hill?
No, when I did that, I just had a lens cloth and I just blotted it carefully and then sent it into Sony Pro the next day. Got it back Monday, and it was good to go. Yeah.
Nice.
So, yeah. But I try and that's again having towels there to put your stuff on, because the salt will eat away at this stuff.
I didn't even think about that.
Yeah, no, it's true. Obsessed about backgrounds. We've already talked about most of this stuff, right? But the other big thing is practicing, right? Like this shot was super tough to get. That's when I flooded the lens. But yeah, because that's knowing your autofocus, because the lens wants to focus on contrast, right? So it's constantly focusing on snowflakes. I get a lot of questions about access, right? Like getting into things, but access isn't always everything. So many photos that I make are from public points. Like this was up in the public, multiple exposure in camera, and it worked out great. But all these photos are done from public areas. Right?
And you can see, definitely a long lens does make a big difference, because you can really isolate and cut out moments of action.
Yeah. Yeah, but that's also knowing how to crop too, right?
100%. We got a question here from Steve, who he says, you mentioned importing into Lightroom, yet Lightroom is notoriously slow. Are you shooting RAW or only JPEG? I'm surprised you don't, you actually use Photo Mechanic, but how long ago did it take you kind of make up that decision? Because Lightroom is a bit slow, and has Photo Mechanic kind of really changed how you operate?
Oh, for sure. So when you tag your photos in your camera, when you save them, they're also the first ones to load into Lightroom, right? So as soon as those tagged ones are in, you can stop your ingest until later, and then just export those into Lightroom. But that's why I use one of the big features of Photo Mechanic is you can tag the ones you want and then import, because Lightroom is slow, especially importing RAW, and I shoot everything RAW. It's just habit. I like the flexibility. But yeah, it is slow. It's getting better, but I find rebooting the camera every once in a while, or rebooting the computer, helps speed things up, because it does bog down. Like after you get to a certain point, you get that little wheel of death going, and then you just start up and go from square one. But that's how I manage it. Sure. Tag into Photo Mechanic and then export the tagged ones only. Because the other thing too is captioning in Photo Mechanic is so much easier. Because I constantly, if I have to change something in Lightroom, caption-wise, it's a disaster. Okay. It's like panning for me.
No doubt. All right, so what's our last section here? Is this?
Well, I always get questions about workflow and some little secrets that I have to help keep me organized.
So we kind of covered that a little bit with
This is the latest thing that I've been doing, is putting green and red stickers on my
smart
on my batteries, so green's good to go and red isn't. It's simple. I keep them organized that way. With my cards, if the label is up, they're good to go. If I haven't downloaded them, the contacts are up, and if I've downloaded them, the contacts are down. It's simple, and if you're consistent with it, then you're not going to reformat cards that you don't want to.
Perfect.
This thing from Kickstarter, I'm really excited about. I backed this thing. It's like a battery and card holder. That's one thing I've always wanted, so that you can put a couple batteries and a couple cards in it and throw them in your pocket. So I'm really excited to see that. Kickstarter has a lot of great things.
Oh yeah.
I think that's how Peak Design got. I can't believe it took me that long to start using these Peak Design anchors.
Yeah, no, big fan of their products.
Huge, especially because switching from 70 to 200 to a 400, because you want your strap on your 400, not on the body. So that was a new huge thing. Generally, I never use stock lens hoods. I always use these rubber things. It's more for bumpers, right? You're walking around, and I don't want to like smash things. And in fact, the one time I had these things on it at what was it? Pan Am Games in Toronto at the Velodrome, and the guy he didn't quite understand lens hood. I had a wide, and he said take it off, and I said, well, it's fixed in, it can't come off. But he asked me to take that off, and as soon as I put the camera down, I dented the ring, and it took me 3 years to get that fixed. And then I got a new Whistler backpack, which works great, and I got my little handy Sport Institute bag that I keep all my stuff in, so that stuff's not flying all over the place. And then my gray card. I'm a little bit colorblind, so
really?
I struggle with stuff sometimes. But like the diving I shot the other day, the lighting was horrible.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's like a giant softbox, but you don't know the color, right? And if it's sunny, if it's overcast, or if you're closer to lights that are in there. So I actually did my white balance off of the corner of this steel, because you can't always run around with these gray cards.
Fair enough.
We were just talking about this. For me, the bane of my existence is captioning. So I've started cheating a little bit because it just takes so long sometimes. So on the left-hand side, I was shooting some goal ball, which is a blind sport, which is really cool to see. But there's only 3 guys on each team, right? So I basically just put the roster in there and just said, here's the finals. A lot of times I will put a generic highlight in, and if I use a photo of a specific athlete, then I'll put the pictured part in afterwards. And then, but like at the games and stuff like that, I'll do the full caption. I use code replacements all the time. If you don't use code replacements with Photo Mechanic, do it. It's good. Set up a text file. If you're shooting hockey, type in the player number, and then tab over, and then whatever you want to go in, like Rebecca Johnston, number 6 forward for Team Canada, and all you have to do is type in her number 6 with a delineator, and it'll populate. It's great. It's
Perfect.
A huge time saver.
Good.
Like Photo Mechanic is like a scientific calculator. I use it, for adding and subtracting, but the depth of Photo Mechanic is incredible. It's ridiculous good. Like, especially if you're managing photos, it's good.
3 hard drives there.
Yeah. I have 19 of these on my desk right now, and I have an equal number at the Sport Institute. It's just like, that's why I started purging so much. It's so much data. One of the tools I use is Carbon Copy Cloner. You just be mindful that whatever you copy over, if you have something else in the other files, you're going to lose it. You have safety nets, but this works great for doing backups.
Yeah, figuring out what a proper data management system is huge.
Yeah. Where'd my mouse go?
I don't know.
This is how I set up my files. So each month I set up my photo file on my desk with a Lightroom catalog, a data folder, a video data folder if I do any, and then all the photos that I have. So at the very beginning of the year, it'll be called the CSI Master, and then at the end of January, I'll download it, take it off my laptop, and then February, I'll start a new file for February, and then I add them all together. So the Master Lightroom catalog has the entire year in it.
Wow.
And like the master date up top has every month and every day. Because it's the only way I can manage it. I've tried other things, but and I'm old school. This is the way I keep track of things. So every day, what's in there? Have I actually verified the content of it? Have I tagged it? Have I captioned it? Have I edited it? Have I purged it? And who have I delivered it to? So do I need to send it to Winsport? Internal stuff for CSI, we have a drive now, the Dave Holland Memorial Photo Library, even though I'm not dead yet. And I've started, I have my home website on PhotoShelter, so with unlimited data there, I started backing up stuff there.
Perfect.
And then my image bank that's constantly under construction. So, but yeah, it's old school.
But it works for you. That's the important part,
and it
right?
works fine, yeah.
Yeah, some redundancy and make sure that
Yeah.
it works for you and your workflow.
Yeah. Chad, any more questions about workflow?
Nope, we're all good. John Morris says text replacements are awesome.
Yeah. As far as processing goes, when I import in, I do the noise reduction right off the bat, and then I have my preset for sports photography, and that's it right there. That's all I do. Take down the highlights, up the shadows, down the blacks, and then just a little bit of color tweaking. And I don't know how well it shows up, but it just adds a little punch to it. Mm-hmm. And that's all I'm looking for is just a little bit of.
I like it too. Keep it simple.
Like it's really close to the original, but it just has just a little bit more, a little bit more to it. I don't know how well it shows up in this, but it's the exact same thing. Adds a little punch.
Yeah.
So, yeah. But that's it for workflow. Fire away with questions if you have them.
Yeah.
But I try and keep it consistent, and I try and keep track, because otherwise I just keep losing stuff.
For sure. What about safety? What is the balance for you between getting an interesting shot and maintaining safety for both you and the athletes? Do you have any horror stories about getting too close to action?
Not for me. I know lots of people who have come away from the side of a ski hill or something bloody. Who was it? Michaela Schifrin, I think, crashed into a bunch of photographers at the Olympics. That's again knowing sports. It's knowing where you are. Before you move, look behind you, look beside you. Because I know lots of people who just jump up and go, right?
Yeah.
But shoulder check, always shoulder checking. And just, knowing the sports helps, because you can tell when something's going to go south. I'm lucky because I work with the best athletes in the world. I was on the side of the half pipe, but a foot away from the edge of the half pipe. I was here and I had a remote here, and Simon came up, landed right in between them. It's like, oh, hi. But I mean, they're skilled enough. Like with these athletes, you don't move. You let them go around you, right? Because especially on a ski hill, like if you're crossing the hill to get to the other side of slopestyle or something like that, keep your eye out.
Yeah.
But if you see somebody coming, just stop, and they'll go around you. I want to say common sense, but that's not common. But yeah, it's mostly awareness. Just head on a swivel and knowing. If you don't know the sport and you don't know where you can go, then ask somebody, right? I've seen guys lean monopods up against the bumpers in speed skating.
Oh, geez.
And those are crash zones, right? Like even during the Olympics, knowing that the 500 meters there's more crashes than in the 10K. Like if you crash in a 10K, go to a different event. But so many of the photographers had their cameras and the computer right up against the mat. And if somebody goes down, it's going to be an entire yard sale. So, put your stuff against the back wall, put it out of the way. When you're walking, this is a huge pet peeve of mine. Shrink your monopod. Don't leave it full length and walk around with it, because you're going to take somebody's eye out. I see it all the time, and it drives me crazy.
Right on. All right. Now, what do you get out of, I mean, there's got to be more to just capturing a great moment. Like, what do you get out of it? And, you know, I see the next slide coming up, so I'm leading into this one, you know, giving back to the athletes. I mean, these guys aren't high profile, well, they're high profile, but they're not high paid athletes. They're not.
No, but it's, you know, it's, again, it's that relationship. Like, they get photos for free from me, like, especially the training stuff. On my image bank, which is constantly under construction, when the athletes sign, like when they create a membership and they sign in, they can download photos for free. A full res one is $20, and I've talked to enough of them and they're fine with that. But in the gym, it's like, you know, I'm right there with them and they're training and I'm taking photos, and it's like I just send them. I'm not going to go $5.
Yeah.
You know, so on top of just supporting them with social media currency, I do every once in a while, I do an open studio, and I'm going to try and set one up this summer. But it's basically I find a space at Winsport and set up all my lights and backdrops and just say, if you want photos, come and get them. If you've never tried photos and you want to try a photo shoot, like the girl on the left, I kept jonesing her, just like, you got to do photos. Created a monster. She just can't get enough. But yeah, it's like if you need something for your side hustle, or if you want just a headshot, or you want something for sponsors, come on in, right? And so I do that. This wasn't a give back, but it was nice to be there because it's part of knowing her too. I think that's one of my more successful photos. But these ones I've been doing post training photos. Yeah. Like just there's a concrete pillar, and as soon as they're done training, just stand there and either mean mugging or whatever. These are all wrestlers and they just finished rolling around on the mats. So I'm trying to do that, give back to everybody a little bit, you know, with the open studios, and you know, have some fun. And that's where you build relationships. Yeah,
I mean, Brandon Payne just asked, you know, trying to shoot on a higher level, skate and snowboard events such as Red Bull, World Skate, who do I connect with, or how do I make that happen? And like you've been mentioning, right, it's making those connections, and it's being respectful, and just sort of keep putting the effort in there.
Yeah,
and good things happen.
With those things, there's always there's always a media contact. You go to the website, you go to media, and there's either an accreditation form or a contact, and you just explain what you're doing, right? But if you don't get in, if they decide not to accredit you, you still stand on the outside of the fence with your camera, right? Yeah. And then you produce some photos, you get them out there on social, and say, and the next time you do it, this is what I've done in the past. They would, a lot of times, like especially during COVID, they want to know who you're working for and why you need to be there. You know, hopefully it'll start to loosen up again, but you know, just to keep the numbers down and keep people spread out, they would deny a lot of accreditations, but it should start opening back up. And you know, if you say, listen, I'm trying this, or even if the local newspaper or something like that, say, listen, can you just vouch for me to get me in, and I'll send you a photo or two.
That's fantastic.
You know, it's you got to start somewhere, right?
Well, that's good.
You know, if you're overseas, like I remember one of the first golf tournaments I shot was the Qatar Masters, and you know, I just filled out the accreditation form, and they said, okay, come on over. Because if you're coming from overseas, they expect that you're probably there for a reason.
Oh,
yeah.
Interesting.
So just keep trying, and if you don't get in, shoot from outside. Like I showed on those other things. Like I shoot from outside the course so much. Like at Winsport, I'll get the 600 and I'll go across the ski hill, so you can compress, really pull that background in with the mountains.
Yeah.
You can't get that from inside. So.
That's good. Well, Dave, you've been fantastic. Some great photos, some really, really good tips here. I do want to thank Sony for sponsoring tonight's event, and make sure if you want to take advantage of that special promotion to email Evelyn. It's Evelyn, EVELYN at thecamerastore.com, and she will follow up with you with that. And Dave, I hope we get another episode with you where we can go shoot some more speed skating or something outside and go from there. Thanks everybody for tuning in, and we'll catch you guys next time.
Thanks, everybody.